Imagine an entire civilization, one of the most advanced of its time, simply fading away. Not with a bang, but with a whisper. This is the story of the Indus Valley Civilization, one of history's greatest unsolved mysteries. Around 4,000 years ago, a society that built some of the world's first planned cities, like Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro, began to decline. Its sprawling urban centers, home to tens of thousands of people, were slowly abandoned. Where did they all go? There are no signs of a massive war, no evidence of a cataclysmic event that wiped them out. They just vanished from the historical record. This isn't just a story about ancient ruins. It's a detective story spanning millennia, and the clues are buried deep in the earth and perhaps even in the DNA of people living today. So join me as we journey back in time to unravel the puzzle of a lost civilization. To truly grasp the scale of this mystery, we need to appreciate just how advanced the Indus Valley Civilization was. Flourishing around 2500 BCE, at the same time as ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia, their society was a marvel of engineering and social organization. Their cities weren't chaotic jumbles of buildings. They were meticulously planned on a grid system with wide streets, public buildings, and even the world's first known urban sanitation systems. Think about that. Over 4,000 years ago, they had homes with private bathrooms connected to a sophisticated network of covered drains running beneath the streets. They developed standardized weights and measures and produced bricks of such uniform size and quality that they were used across a vast territory larger than ancient Egypt. They traded with faraway lands like Mesopotamia, shipping goods like timber, carnelian beads, and cotton. But here is what's really striking. Archaeologists have found very few weapons and no definitive evidence of large-scale warfare. No grand palaces for kings or monumental temples for gods. It seems they were a remarkably peaceful and egalitarian society. And that makes their disappearance even more baffling. A peaceful, prosperous, and organized civilization doesn't just pack up and leave without a very good reason. So, what could that reason be? The most compelling evidence points to a force of nature they couldn't control: climate change. For centuries, this civilization thrived along the banks of the mighty Indus River and another massive river system known as the Ghaggar-Hakra. Many scholars believe the Ghaggar-Hakra was the legendary Saraswati River described in ancient Hindu texts. But around 1900 BCE, the climate began to shift. The powerful monsoons that fed these rivers started to weaken and become more erratic. Geological evidence shows that the Ghaggar-Hakra, once a life-giving artery for countless settlements, began to dry up, eventually turning into the seasonal stream it is today. Without reliable water, the very foundation of their society, agriculture, started to crumble. The vast fields of wheat and barley that fed their bustling cities could no longer be sustained. It wasn't a sudden apocalypse, but a slow, creeping crisis. A drought that didn't last for a season, but for generations. This environmental collapse would have forced the inhabitants to make a desperate choice: stay and starve, or leave in search of a new home. And the evidence in their abandoned cities supports this idea of a gradual exodus, not a sudden catastrophe. When archaeologists excavate sites like Mohenjo-Daro, they don't find cities burned to the ground or littered with the skeletons of a final, desperate battle. Instead, they find signs of a slow, painful decline. Public services like the drainage systems fell into disrepair. The once grand houses were subdivided into smaller, cruder dwellings, suggesting a breakdown in social order and wealth. Some buildings were left unfinished, as if the workers simply dropped their tools and walked away. It's a haunting image, a once thriving metropolis slowly emptying out, street by street, house by house. This wasn't a civilization that was conquered. It was a civilization that was slowly choked by a changing environment. The people didn't die in their cities. They left them behind, carrying what they could, hoping to find a better life somewhere else. The silence of these ghost cities speaks volumes, telling a story of migration born from desperation. So if they left, where did they go? the evidence suggests they didn't just vanish into thin air. Instead, they likely migrated eastward and southward. As the river systems in the core Indus region dried up, people moved toward the more water-rich plains of the Ganges and Yamuna rivers and down into regions like Gujarat. Archaeologists have traced this movement by tracking the evolution of their pottery and artifacts. The large centralized cities gave way to smaller, more rural and decentralized villages. It seems the Indus people adapted to their new reality. They traded their urban lifestyle for a more sustainable, agricultural one in areas where the monsoon was more reliable. And what's fascinating is that elements of their culture didn't disappear. Things like their unique pottery styles, certain religious motifs like the pipal tree, and specific deities and even agricultural practices seem to re-emerge in the cultures that rose in India in the following centuries. This suggests that the people of the Indus Valley didn't die out. They assimilated. They merged with local populations, creating a new cultural blend. So it's very possible that the descendants of this great ancient civilization are still with us. Their genetic and cultural legacy woven into the fabric of modern South Asia. For a long time, the most popular theory was much more dramatic: the Aryan invasion. This idea, proposed by early 20th century archaeologists, suggested that waves of horse-riding warriors from Central Asia, called Aryans, swept down into India, conquered the peaceful Indus people, and destroyed their cities. It was a neat and simple explanation that fit the colonial-era mindset of the time. The discovery of some unburied skeletons in Mohenjo-Daro was even presented as proof of a final massacre. However, modern archaeology and genetic studies have largely debunked this theory. Closer examination of those skeletons showed no signs of violent injury consistent with a battle. Their deaths were likely due to disease or other causes. More importantly, there is a complete lack of archaeological evidence for a large-scale invasion or widespread destruction at any Indus site. DNA studies also paint a more complex picture, suggesting a slow, steady migration and mixture of peoples over centuries, not a single violent conquest. The story of a peaceful civilization being wiped out by invaders is compelling, but the evidence just isn't there. The truth appears to be far less dramatic and far more complex. While climate change seems to be the primary culprit, it was likely part of a perfect storm of environmental pressures. It wasn't just drought. At sites like Mohenjo-Daro, there's also clear evidence of catastrophic floods. The city was rebuilt at least 7 times on top of silt deposits left by the overflowing Indus River. Living there must have been a constant battle against the water. So you have this devastating combination. On one hand, the rivers that sustained agriculture are drying up. And on the other, the main river is prone to devastating floods that could wipe out a city. Add to this the potential for epidemics. In densely populated cities with declining sanitation, diseases like cholera or malaria could have spread like wildfire, weakening the population and further encouraging people to leave the crowded urban centers for the relative safety of the countryside. It wasn't one single event, but a combination of long-term environmental instability, drought, floods, and possibly disease that made life in the great cities of the Indus Valley simply unsustainable. And through all of this, there is one final, frustrating piece of the puzzle that keeps the mystery alive. We can't read their writing. The Indus people had a written language, a beautiful script made up of hundreds of signs, often found on small stone seals. But to this day, no one has been able to decipher it. We have no Rosetta Stone, no bilingual text to unlock its secrets. This is a huge missing piece. Imagine trying to understand ancient Egypt without being able to read hieroglyphs. We would have no king lists, no religious texts, no records of their history, thoughts, or beliefs. This is the situation we're in with the Indus Valley. We can study their cities, their pottery, and their bones, but we can't hear their voice. They left us no stories of their decline, no records of a changing climate, no pleas for help. Their silence is what makes this mystery so profound. The answers to so many of our questions are likely locked away in a script we cannot read, making it one of history's greatest unsolved linguistic puzzles. So, where does that leave us? Did an entire civilization truly disappear? The answer is probably no. The Indus Valley Civilization didn't vanish. It transformed. The people weren't wiped out by war or a single cataclysm. Instead, faced with an environmental crisis that crippled their way of life, they did what humans have always done. They adapted. They migrated, leaving their magnificent but unsustainable cities behind. They moved to new lands, merged with new people, and adopted new ways of living. The idea of a single monolithic Indus people gave way to a diverse tapestry of regional cultures that would eventually form the foundations of later civilizations in India. Their legacy isn't found in a single, unbroken line, but in the subtle cultural and genetic threads that are woven throughout South Asia today. The great cities may be ruins, but the people likely live on. Their story, a powerful reminder of human resilience in the face of profound change. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this journey into the past fascinating, be sure to like this video and subscribe for more historical mysteries. See you next time.